Good afternoon. Now, I'm very conscious I'm between you and lunch. I got it. And I love food, so it's okay. We're not going to be here for the day. But what I am going to ask you to do is to just one more time, as Ankush invited us this morning, to just put aside what comes next and just be really here with me, with the person beside you, with the people who are behind you. Because however we got here today, and many have thought about our physical journey, there's also been a set of experiences that have led us to who we think we are today, as Nick alluded to earlier, right? And some of them are great, joyful experiences that we celebrate and we want to replicate. Anyone had any of those? No joy? No joy in the room. Okay, hold on a minute. I'm going to have to get Hosier back now if there's no joy. And what about the moments that have brought us to our knees? Those moments of deep sadness, of loss of expectation, physical loss. Because that's also part of what's brought us here today, isn't it? To the who we are, or the who we think we are. Yeah? Because as Nick said, I want to talk about leadership. And sometimes when you hear there's somebody talking about leadership, you might want to say, oh, this is the corporate chick. I'm going to have a little snooze. Might be an expensive one, I'm just saying. But if you come with me, I'm going to share two stories that actually, it was only in the getting ready for this event that I realized how significant one particular moment was when I was 18 years of age, and how it actually defined my personal philosophy around leadership. And I promise if you stay with me, you'll hear and feel something to surrender into, and you will be on your feet. Is that okay?
Yes.
After 30 minutes, right? We got you. Because you see, my definition of leadership is really, really simple. And I say this: leadership is when you take a decision to make a significant impact in any moment, in any situation. And it's not about a big title, a big job title. It's not about having a big desk, because, once upon a time, leaders sat behind big desks and thought big thoughts, and people did what they wanted. Right? I don't remember those times. Yeah? And it's certainly not about having a corner office or having trimmings of what we sometimes associate with big jobs. For me, it's really simple. It's a decision to cause significant impact in any given moment. So whether you're here and you think you're a parent or a physician, or might be some coaches in the house, maybe you might be very quiet. Oh, some comedians, yes, good. No matter how you identify, the opportunity to be a leader, if you choose to be it, and you choose, which tells me you might be choosing the next step forward. Because when we really talk about the demonstration of leadership, that's something that happens, and it has happened numerous times already, even just in our time together this morning, where we have leaders who have spoken to our intellect, to our heads. We've experienced some emotion. We've been cracked wide open. But nothing really happens until we do something with the hands and with the feet. Otherwise, it's just a great idea. Yeah? Okay. So this story begins 18 years ago, and I'm not going to tell you an intervening history, right? This is a moment in time where one 7-minute experience had such a profound in my life, I'm still talking about it 30 years later. And I have never met this story. I'm going to say that again. I have never met a single person from this story, but they have touched my life. I didn't even recognize until I really started to get still about what I wanted to talk with you about today. Because sometimes we forget that even the people we think aren't looking or aren't listening are taking our cues from us. So 30 years ago, I was an 18-year-old university student, just coming up to my first year exams. And because the focus more was on study, cramming and revision than our usual Saturday night activities, myself and a pal had gone over to my friend Maggie's flat to study. Yeah? And it happened to be the night that the Eurovision contest was on. So let me tell you just for a second what Eurovision is in case you've never heard of it. So Eurovision is a contest that happens once per year where countries nominate an artist to represent them for the glory of winning the contest so that you host it the following year, right? And Ireland had won the Eurovision in 1993. So in April of 1994, Ireland was hosting it. And that evening, when the three girls of us had got together, we had decided we were going to do a little homage to an Irish artist called Sinead O'Connor. Matt, will you give me a slide there? And Sinead O'Connor, who was 27 years of age at the time, unusually had shaven her head. So these three college students decided this would be a really great idea. Now, we were not fully committed. So our plan was we would shave kind of, to here. It's kind of in now, isn't it? Where you still have the ponytail and you look like the girl who left home a year earlier, but underneath all is different. Kind of a bit like coming to a being event, really, isn't it? Right? So here we were. Now, Maggie had no TV, so we were listening to this Eurovision Song Contest on the radio. And there was a BBC broadcaster called Terry Wogan who was narrating what was happening. It was kind of background noise, because we had our shaves doing this. And all of a sudden, this really haunting soprano voice came out from the airwaves. The lady shaves were dropped. We thought we heard the voice of an angel. But something had happened in our hearts. Something had just moved in a single phrase. And the music went on. Beautiful chorus chimes in. Feel the magic and power of surrender to Ishka Baha, to the water of life. And we were a bit kind of, what is going on here? Who are these angelic voices? And then the music changed and the harps started plucking and the fiddles playing. And the voice of Terry Wogan comes over the airwaves again. And he tells us that a young lady called Jean Butler, an Irish dancer, had taken the stage and she was doing a traditional Irish jig in soft shoes, so we couldn't hear her. And he went on to say that Jean was dressed in this really sexy, off-the-shoulder black dress with beautiful lace sleeves. We can get a photo there, Matt, thank you. Now, if anyone has ever seen an Irish dancing competition, this is not a traditional look. We might have an example of a traditional look, Matt. Yeah. Now, I searched our family home for a photo of me in this costume, because I was more the type of dancer that got the judges saying, "You're great, but you're out of time. You know, we highly recommend you, but you need more practice." But this was the costume. I mean, is it any wonder? I probably was weighed down, right? So what was starting to happen here was a series of breaks with tradition. Jean Butler is making Irish dancing sexy. But they weren't done with us yet. Because the next thing, the tempo picks up and the drums started going. And then we hear this thud of a foot. And we heard that this young called Mark was taking the stage in a billowing silk blue shirt, arms out, declaring himself here. A little bit of that. Whoa! But we said 30 years ago, what in the holy hell is going on? And by the time this session finished, and remember this is an interval act, this is not a competitor in the competition. By the time it was finished, an emotional Terry Wogan is telling us how the whole audience is on their feet, 3,000 people in Dublin's Point Theatre, including the President of Ireland, cheering, chorusing, like never before for a piece of Irish music. And the following day, the fact that an Irish act won the Eurovision, a double victory, was not even talked about, because all anyone was talking about was the 7-minute interval act, because it had captured the hearts, the minds, the hands, the feet. You know, suddenly we're all accessing our inner Irish dancer. When, as a child, I loved Irish dancing, but it was so uncool. It was just a very definition of what you were not part of, really. And there may be some of you saying, I do not want to listen to another Irish person waxing lyrical about river dance. But I promised you a leadership story, and that's what I'm going to give you. So hold on to your hat. Oh no, I won't mention hats. Sorry, Matt. I'm sorry. Because what happened that night was a young woman who you may never have heard of took a stand for something. And if we go back to the Archimedes quote, "Give me a lever and a place to stand, and I will change the world." What do most people talk about? Levers. How am I going to do it? When am I going to do it? How is it all going to come together? This 35-year-old woman. She was a producer in the national broadcaster. She had started out her professional career wanting to be an actor. But she discovered that she was more at home in herself behind the camera than in front. Is there anyone here who can identify with that? I'm more comfortable behind the camera, behind the scenes, not being out in front. Yeah, right? And in fact, I'm going to go a step further about why I love this woman. When she was originally asked, by RTE to become the executive producer for the Eurovision, she really didn't like the Eurovision. For some people, this would have been the job of a lifetime. For her, it was, I don't really like Eurovision. I don't know, do I want to do it? And so the second thing I learned from Moya Doherty, we see a photograph of her here, a woman, again, I have never met, but has had such a profound impact on my life, was that she was willing to let go of her likes and her dislikes and her preferences and take a stand for the opportunity she was given. Because when she decided to take a stand, you know where she stood? She stood in a possibility that Irish dancing could be set free of the ringlets and the heavy green costumes, and it could be elevated to a modern theatrical experience. And that is where she stood. And every time she spoke to anyone, as she assembled her team around her, she spoke her vision, that this interval, the time when we normally stretch our legs, think about coffee, and think, God, it's very long. Now, when are we going to get a break? Anyone? No. She decided it was an opportunity for change. Not because anyone asked her, because she had an inner knowing she was willing to really take a stand on. So when she onboarded her choreographer and talked her vision, the choreographer immediately said, oh, I see a line of dancers. And when she went to a composer, Bill Whelan, and she commissioned him, all she told him is, this will happen in the Point Theatre on the banks of the River Liffey, and we're going to modernise and produce a theatrical experience of Irish dance. And the term river dance comes from that very conversation, because the first time it was produced, it was on the banks of the River Liffey in Dublin. And of course, the internet was brand new at that time. This was 1993-94. And she could put out a call to Irish dancers all over the world to join in something special. And every time they spoke, something happened. A little bit of magic. Something was in the air about this piece. And they only had 4 months to bring it all together. And it was a one-time must-win game. In fact, the reason the footage is a little grainy is because it was just shot for one night. But some of them who were involved saw that there was a longer-term future, and one of them, again, the composer, he lobbied record labels in Dublin to get it made. And they said, no. No one will ever play a 7-minute piece of Irish traditional music on a radio station. So he found a corporate sponsor, and they made the CD. So the next day, when this was a resounding success, and people were asking, because journalists from all over Europe were here, well, were not here, but they were in Dublin, I must get my geography right, wanted to be able to play the hit. And from that, a theatrical show was born. It's 9 months later, female executive producer with a 9 months pregnancy to birth one of the most successful musical theatrical shows on earth. And again, amidst all the naysayers, you can't raise the funds. You know what she did? They mortgaged their family home. 35-year-old woman, 2 small children. Courage it took to do that. That nothing was going to get in her way. And even when the very good people of Ireland, my fellow countrymen and women, said, don't open in February. Bad weather in February. There'll be nobody coming out on a Saturday night in February. There might be strikes, nobody will come. And she tells this. She had to back herself and her team again and again and again, because not only were the naysayers against her, hundreds and hundreds of years of tradition were against her and her team. And to give you a sense of how successful river dance is, 30 years in, it's still going, firstly. It has played, I want to get this right, in 49 different countries all over the world. 30 million people, 30 million people have sat in an audience for a live river dance shows across 15,000 performances. Because she took a stand for 7 minutes. So just think about that. And somebody mentioned the butterfly effect or the ripple effect earlier. Every single person involved in that initial act, guess what happened? They too became leaders. They started to stand up. The choreographers, the set designers, costume designers, the lighting technicians, the camera people. Every single person became so invested in one woman's single statement. And out of that, not just the success of the show, but Irish dancing came out of the closet. Right? Yeah. Irish dancing was so uncool, unless if you were in the Irish-American community, it had a different kudos. Dance schools sprung up all over the world. In fact, river dance was the first Western show to be performed in the Great People's Hall in Beijing when it opened. It was performed for numerous US presidents, for Pope John Paul, for Queen Elizabeth, the late Queen Elizabeth. So it captured something. And this 18-year-old, and she's still here, in my very simple view, two things happen. You have this very courageous woman who took a stand and enrolled people so powerfully. They stood with her. They invested in her. She took personal risk. She mortgaged her home. She had 2 young children. And more than that, in my version of this, for Michael Flatley, because Michael Flatley did something that night in the opening of his arms. Because Irish dancing is like this. And when I was young, people used to tell us it's like that so that people can't see what you're doing. Because Irish culture was oppressed for quite a number of generations. So while that is, in one sense, very interesting, it's painful. And Michael Flatley last month on a BBC interview said that he was lobbied up until the moment he went on stage not to dare raise his arms by Irish dance schools all over the world. Because we, the collective we were very engaged and enraptured by this. And he dared to go like the flamenco dancers. Yeah? So my third lesson from Moya Doherty, which again, I've never met her, but she has guided my life. So when you take a powerful place to stand, it not just elevates you. It doesn't just deliver the product. It elevates everyone with whom it touches. Every person involved in the production. And there have been a multitude. In fact, I think there's been 64 marriages, 194 river dance babies in the 30 years since. And there's been a career path for dancers to see their craft elevated, almost like a Russian ballet. And to have an outlet for their creativity, their skills, their talent, which was previously simply unavailable, maybe because it was unthought of. So bringing this all together, because I want to talk to you about how does this impact you? You with me so far? Right? Okay, good. Good. The fourth lesson that I have from Moya to pass on to you, just in case you've missed it. Remember I said about Archimedes and give me a lever and a place to stand and I can change the world? And how sometimes it's so easy to get caught up in the levers, in the how. In her philosophy, it wasn't so much how, was it? It was who. Who? Who's going to be the choreographer? Who's going to be the composer? Who's going to be the lead dancers? Who's going to be in the troupe? How was a much later question. So when you find yourself getting caught up in, which mic am I in?
Both are live.
Okay, so when you find yourself getting caught up in, and I find myself getting caught up in, the how, I kind of go back here. And long before I knew this question of who do you need to be, wasn't in my vocabulary till about 2 years ago, and I found myself in this Facebook group going, what? Different story for another day. Right? Something in that moved everyone. Because she took a significant impact in a moment. And yeah, it's true. It's true that great visions can often be world domination. They can start that way. But they don't have to. A great vision can be to create a really meaningful impact in our world, in our organization, in our teams, in a meeting. Or a great vision can be, how do I make best maximum impact of a 7-minute interval act? It's not even the star of the show. To such an extent that 30 years later, the person who heard it and didn't even see it can tell you exactly where they were and what they were doing when your vision came to life. So my question for you is, of course, who do you need to be the leader in your lives? And do you dare, when hundreds of years of tradition may be stacked up against you, or generations might not even have thought of what you're trying to propose, to dare to do it anyway? Or in a world where everyone walks hands by their side, do you dare to say, here I am? Because you see, we can't change worlds, anyone's world, without changing our own. We can't change lives, anyone's life, without changing our own. And we can't change our life unless we really change our day, our decisions. I call them the moments that matter. That can cause us to create a different future that's not necessarily written by the traditions of the past. And if you bear with me, I'm not quite finished. Because I made you a promise at the beginning. And I made you a promise of surrender. And that by the end you would be on your feet. Do you remember that? Yep. Yeah. And who said earlier, when you make the bold promise, make sure you land the plane? Was that you, Ankush? Thank you. Yeah, I was just crossing all these lines out, in my little sketchy speech beforehand. Because you see, when I realized that this was the talk I was going to give, I only saw the end of it. And I thought, I cannot talk about this beautiful piece of music and talk about head, heart, hands, and feet and not give you an opportunity to fully experience this. So, now for the hands and feet part. Okay, now, we are almost 300 people in a space. So here's a little bit of guidance for how we do this, right? So I want you to sit still in your chair, your hands on your feet on the floor, your hands on your legs, preferably your own. So you never know what's happening. And before we start the music, don't start it just yet, thank you. We can just, yeah, thank you. We're all dying to do this now, I know that, right? But we're a lot of people and we've got to be safe, okay? So what I want you to do is I want you to deeply connect now. Before we move a muscle, I want you to deeply connect to whatever your reason for being here, as Sanika invited us to earlier, or what your vision is for your life, or whatever kind of resonates more, that we can use this beautiful music now, and we're going to go into a 3-minute piece of it. And we're going to do this in 3 phases. In the first, you're going to hear this beautiful soprano. And I just invite you to just let the words in. And then you'll come into a melody, which is when Jean Butler is dancing the jig. And you can experience this exactly as I experienced it in those back 30 years ago. Just let it really into your heart. And then there'll come a moment, and you will know the moment when it arrives, when you'll hear the drums and the tempo upholds. And I invite you at that moment to dance, to form a line. Let's just do it organically and naturally where it arises. Having somebody either side of you, and when you dance, and don't worry about the steps, you do you. You dance like your vision depends upon it. You dance like you're shaking out the things that might get in your way. Right? You're allowed to dance. And you may move your arms. We're not doing traditional style. Yeah? Ready? Okay. And if you'd like to stand while we do the whole thing, that's fine. Do you. So we'll start nice and quiet, inward, and let this be a really beautiful love song to what you want to be in your life. Thank you, Matt. Ben, yeah.
My cry and my hunger in search for you. Taste my breath on the wind. See the sky as it mirrors my colors, hints and whispers begin.
Over to you, Nick.
Okay. Let's hear it again, one more time for Caroline. She is so masterful. Holy cow.